Good afternoon, scholars. Mr. Johnson here, and as you can see, my hair is not crazy, so we didn't hit our goal, but let's see how we did with our turn-in percentage. We got a boost. We went up 7%, but that's still far short of our 50% goal. So too bad. I was going to go for the mohawk, but I guess not now. I'll come up with more challenges moving forward. I know that you guys can get above 50%. Make sure, great job for those of you who are getting your work turned in. We actually have a lot of great work to talk about today. And if you've got friends who you're in touch with, get on them. Make sure that they're doing their work because they're falling behind. I wanted to shout out a few, two different scholars for their work. The first is Rayna. Rayna's evidence was so well selected for her evidence for the jurors being objective and the jurors being subjective. I'm going to review what those terms mean because a lot of us got we're still getting kind of mixed up, which is fine. We just learned those terms, so we're going to review them later. But the way that Miss Jenny graded this, if a piece of evidence you selected was just phenomenal, stood by itself, it was so strong that it didn't even need any explanation because it was such a well selected piece of evidence. She highlighted those in green. Evidence that isn't as strong but could make sense if you to provide an argument for it. She highlighted those in yellow, and evidence that is just totally inaccurate. She highlighted those in red again. So green, as you can see, is evidence that is so well selected that it doesn't even it's clear on its own. One wouldn't even have to argue it, whether it's objective or subjective. So let's take a look at some of Rayna's quotes. I want you to be able to see the whole screen. Give me a second here. All right, Rayna's. Let me just slide this up so we can see it better. Okay. Move my face down. All right, that's better. All right. Rayna's objective quotes that she found where someone was being fair, fact-minded, and wasn't trying to interject their own opinions as much. She had Juror 8 saying, just naming the facts of the defendant's life. I might argue that last sentence right here, that's not a very good start. That's a little bit subjective, but before that, the fact that his mother died when he was 9, he was in an orphanage, his father served jail term for forgery. Those are facts. We can't argue about those because it's just true. Okay. She's got Juror 3 saying that he's only talking about the facts of the case, and she's got Juror 8 saying just about how he wants to discuss the case and not just he wants to talk about the facts before just voting guilty. So the subjective quotes, the man's a dangerous killer. You could see it. That's one I provided. She's got Juror 10 saying that people like the defendant. I don't know whether it's Puerto Ricans or people from a certain neighborhood, but you can't believe a word they say. They're all born liars. That's a highly subjective statement. And then she's got the 6th juror saying that it's pretty that he was convinced from it's obvious he was convinced from day one. That's subjective. That's his opinion. It's also really good that she uses a mix of the juror. We heard from 8, 3, 10, and 6. It's good to have a mix of different evidence. So you had the evidence tracker. You also had the ASAC response. Israel Nunez blew this out of the water. I'm going to be calling him in 10 years or so. When I need a lawyer, he's who I want representing me in the case. So let's look at how he laid out his argument. I color coded this for him so that you guys can see what a great job he's doing of following the steps, making a claim, giving context in a quote, analyzing it, giving context in a quote, analysis, wrapping up with the claim. Israel and most students felt that the jury is being subjective. because now the jurors are letting their prejudiced thoughts take them over instead of looking through the case and investigating. Context. Most of the jurors have developed prejudiced thoughts on the kid because of his age and other features. So now he's going to get into his key quote. And then when the lead juror said, "All those voting guilty, raise your hands," 7 or 8 hands go up immediately, which shows us that the jurors didn't take a second to double check or back up their claim. They just automatically think that because of his age and other things, he is the guilty killer. Now he's going to go into a second piece of evidence. So he's going to start with context. The 10th juror proceeds to say, quote, look, we're all grown-ups here. We heard the facts, didn't we? Now you're going to tell us that we're supposed to believe that kid, knowing who he is? Listen, I've lived among them. I've lived among them my whole life. You can't believe a word they say. I mean, they're born liars. Israel, my push for you. I think the part of the quote you really wanted to get to were these last couple sentences. Your quote was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sentences long. I would recommend cutting out those first 3 and just going with the 2 sentences that you really wanted to get to, because that quote was a little bit long. Well selected, but too long. The juicy part of that would be, I've lived among them my whole life. You can't. The juicy part is, you can't believe a word they say. I mean, they're born liars. Your context can bring us up to speed about juror 10. Let's look at your analysis for that quote, which shows us that he let his experiences decide whether or not the boy lives, and thinks that if some people lie, then everyone lies. Now here's his conclusion. It's going to be super similar to his claim, which was they're letting their prejudices guide the case instead of the facts. Let's see how he reworded it. If the jurors were not prejudiced, comma, good complex sentence, Israel, then the whole decision of votes would have been a deeper talk and would have been discussed precisely. All right, we got some spelling errors there, but great response, Israel. Great job following the steps. Great job being clear with what you're arguing, and then just following all the steps. This is killer writing. If I were to give this piece of writing to a teacher who didn't know you, they would they would swear this was 8th or 9th grade. So great job. Let's look at today's lesson. It's super similar to, we're doing the same skill as yesterday's, guys. We don't even look at my work because Rayna's and Israel's exemplars were so good. So before we get into today's lessons, I want to review those key terms from yesterday: subjectivity and objectivity, right? And those are the noun forms. So when we use them as adjectives, it's subjective and objective. Subjective is when it's an opinion. Someone is making a decision or making a statement based on their own feelings, their own opinions. Okay, that is different than being objective, which is being very, very fact-based and doing your best to put your personal experiences and preferences aside and just look at the facts. Okay, so when I want you to think of objective equals facts and fair, and subjective equals opinions or experiences. Another way to look at it is, if something is a fact, right? Today is Tuesday. We can't argue that. You can't argue about facts. You don't have to prove facts. When something is subjective, you have to argue it. You have to prove it. Just like in Israel's writing, his claim was subjective. He says they're being prejudiced. That's why he had to prove it, right? Something with subjective, we can argue about things that are subjective. We cannot argue about things that are objective because they're fact. So objective, you can't argue because it's fact. Subjective, we can argue about it because it's more of an opinion. So let's look at these 4 statements from the book. And I'm going to quiz you, a verbal quiz. Is the following statement objective or subjective? The guiding question you're thinking of is, would this have to be argued or proven? All right, statement one. The man was found with a knife stuck 4 inches in his chest. Is that an objective statement or a subjective statement? That statement would be an objective statement because it is a fact, right? That's a fact of the case. You can't argue with it. The knife was there, 4 inches, we can't argue about it. We can argue about who did it, but that's not what that statement was about. Statement two, he's a very fine boy. Subjective, right? What's the word? What's the word or words in that statement that turns it from a fact into an opinion? If you took out very fine, he's a boy, right? Now that's objective. We can't argue that. If you throw in those opinion words like he's a very fine boy, that's subjective. That was a statement made by juror 7. He was obviously being sarcastic because that's not what juror 7 believes. Another statement from juror 7. He's been arrested for mugging. Mugging is robbery, is beating somebody up and robbing them. But here's a statement. He's been arrested for mugging. Objective or subjective? That is an objective statement. It's a fact. It's in his police record. He was arrested. What was the charge? Mugging, right? He was arrested for mugging. That's an objective statement. And statement 4 from juror 3. It's the kids, the way they are nowadays. Angry. Objective, subjective? That would be a subjective statement. That is his opinion. That is his bias. It could be he would have to prove it or argue that they're angry. All right. Today's skill and lesson, guys, is the same exact format as yesterday's. You're going to start on page 23 with the phrase anything. Let's start it off. You're going to end on page 28 that says let's hear from somebody. I provided you space to find 4 quotes. If 4 jump out to you, the requirement is 3. And it's the same prompt as yesterday, because the conversation is going to start to evolve. I want you to see how the conversation is going and how it's changing and evolving, and you make the decision. Okay, so are these guys becoming more subjective or objective now? Okay. Because this is the same exact skill and that you've had practice at this is going to count as a quiz grade. The other grades have just been daily assignments as class participation. This one's going to be a formative assessment, which is a quiz. Okay, so it's going to be weighted a little bit more, but you guys good work yesterday. You've seen some great examples. We've reviewed the 2 key terms. I know you guys are going to do great. Take your time, go to office hours. And also, if obviously you're watching the video because you hear me talking right now, if your classmates ever seem confused, a lot of students are confused when they don't watch the videos. So bare minimum, make sure you're watching the videos. So tell your classmates, hey, watch the videos. They're super helpful. Mr. Johnson will walk you through what you need to know. And then go to office hours. All right. Today, office hours with Miss Jenny. And she will be there from 2:15 to 3:15. The students going to office hours are getting a lot of help, and they're also helping each other. So take advantage of those. Also, teachers want to connect with you. We miss you guys. We want to make sure that you guys are good and that you guys are have everything you need to be doing your schooling from home. All right. I will see you guys tomorrow, and good luck on your first quiz.